you for tuning in. This is Daring Dialogues, and I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. It is Relationship Wednesday, and we are tonight going to be reading about why smart people hurt. So I hope that you have had a good day. I hope that you have hopefully had something to eat by now. I hope you are taking care of your body as this weather continues to get colder in some places, as some places are even fighting off fires, as some places are fighting off heat. I hope that you're doing whatever you can, wherever you are, to keep your body in order. So, we're looking tonight at challenges and coping strategies to make a meaningful life. And we're reading from Why Smart People Hurt. We are in chapter 5, which is talking about the logic of mania. The logic of mania. Um, this is going to be a very interesting chapter because he's going to talk about this mental disorder or this way of thinking, and how the brain races to complete things, or how the brain races, especially in highly intelligent people, and how that can be something that needs to be managed. So that's the chapter that we're going to jump in tonight. I'm not sure if we're going to finish it, but we're going to try to get to a good stopping point. And then if you would like to come on and discuss with me, you can feel free to add yourself by clicking on the camera on IG, and I will bring you on. Here we go. The logic of mania. This species that we currently are, this particular experimental model, has a brain of a certain sort with its capacities and tendencies. Countless metaphors have been created to capture aspects or qualities of this brain, from brain as spider web, delicate, minimal, and hypersensitive, to the brain as a lens, magnifying and intensifying energy to a point, from the brain as a lamp to the brain as a map, from the brain as a cookbook to the brain as a toolbox, and of course, the brain as computer, calculator, and so on. For the purposes of this reading, let's consider it as a high performance engine in some aspects, capacities, and tendencies. It is an unusual and unique engine that we rev up, but that also revs itself up and functions on its own perpetually and for its own reasons. We can send it racing after a calculation and make it do math or balance our checkbook, but it can also send itself racing to create a dream or a nightmare, an obsession or a mania. In this regard, it's also something like a high strung stallion that we can ride if we are masterful and careful, but that can also gallop off on its own. So, what are the features of this high performance engine or high strung stallion that causes smart people so much distress? One is that mysterious and potentially dangerous state known as mania. Excuse me. Mania can hit anyone. It can be induced by street drugs or by other causes, including the dynamics of one's own racing and needy brain. But here we will focus on how mania arises from a person's reliance on brain activity to solve their problems, including their existential ones, and the special way that such reliance afflicts smart people. People who think a lot are more prone to mania than people who do not think a lot. That intelligent, creative, and thoughtful people are the ones more regularly afflicted by mania is beyond question. Research shows a clear linkage between achieving top grades or scoring high on tests and suffering from bipolar disorder. That is, that so called disorder in which depression and mania cyclically appear, and between other similar measures of mental accomplishment and a racing mind. There is plenty of evidence to support the contention that mania disproportionately affects smart, creative, and thoughtful people. One study involving 700,000 adults and reported in the British Journal of Psychiatry indicated that former straight A students were 4 times more likely to be diagnosed bipolar or manic depressive than those who had achieved lower grades. In another study, individuals who scored the highest on tests for mathematical reasoning were 12 times more prone to bipolar disorder. Similar studies underline the linkage between creativity and mania, and we have hundreds of years of anecdotal evidence to support the contention that smart and creative people often get manic. The current naming system used to describe mental disorders like manic depression and bipolar disorder is weak and highly suspect, however. I've discussed this matter of the arbitrary whole cloth creation of mental disorders through certain ruses of definitions, including defining of the term as a mental disorder itself. In rethinking depression and elsewhere, here, let me just repeat a warning to be wary of employing or taking seriously the current mental disorder naming system. In natural psychology, we completely reject it. The current naming system leads to odd and wrong headed hypotheses. For example, that because you are bipolar, you are creative, or that perhaps mania accounts for the higher test scores. What is true is that the greater the reliance on thinking and the more brain capacity for thinking a person manifests, the greater his or her susceptibility towards a racing brain. If you are inclined to think, why would those thoughts not be inclined to race in certain circumstances? If, for example, something threatened you or challenged you, why would your brain not race in its quest to deal with that threat or challenge? What is called mania in this regard is simply a racing brain driven by a certain powerful pressure, need, or impulse. Anything that gets in the way of this seemingly forward motion, a physical obstacle, another person's viewpoint, even a delay in the bus arriving, is viewed as an irritation. Hence, the irritability so often associated with mania. The irritation makes perfect sense. If you must get on with whatever your racing brain is proposing, get every wall painted red, capture that song that's in your mind, solve that theorem, then nothing must get in the way. It is this must that is at the heart of the matter. The must is the foot on the pedal that is driving your racing brain. There's an emergency here, most often an existential emergency, as the individual stares at nothingness and is petrified by the view. She or he must get away from that horrible feeling, and with a kind of strangled laugh that mimics mirth but isn't mirth, they turn to their brain for help. They are frightened and in anguish, and to deal with that, they shout to their brain, "Get me out of here!" Their brain then takes off, dreaming up every manner of scheme or activity or desire. All of the characteristic symptoms that we see in mania, including seemingly high spirits, heightened sexual appetite, high arousal levels, high energy levels, sweating, pacing, sleeplessness, and at its severest, when the train has run off the trails, hallucinations, delusions of grandeur, suspiciousness, aggression, and wild self defeating plans and schemes, makes perfect sense when viewed from the perspective that a powerful need has supercharged the brain already inclined to generate thoughts. This thought machine has been revved up in the service of nothing less than the direst existential hunger, lack, or fear imaginable. All the rest follows. To switch metaphors, the stallion has been spooked and will crash through even the sturdiest fence in his wild, panicked flight. The driving impulse may not be limited to pain. It may not be pain at all. You may be working on a novel or a scientific theory that excites you and you can't wait to get on with it. Still, that excited pursuit, even though in pursuit of something positive and valuable, has caused your mind to move from a lower gear to a higher gear, dramatically revving up the engine that is your brain, and now that engine is whining and straining. A dangerous dynamic is now at play. Are you driving the engine, or is the engine driving you? Yes, you are still in the saddle and clutching the reins, but the powerful stallion may throw you at any second. What can be done about this racing mind? Natural psychology has answers having to do with the art and practice of making meaning. However, the short answer is increased self awareness and the courage to see one's own nature. It is the individual exposing the situation to himself and for himself, announcing that he must wrest control of his mind and his life, and practicing the techniques called mindfulness techniques that amount to the short answer. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that I conduct whole courses on nothing but mindfulness. Mindfulness, sitting with yourself, breathing, thinking, being aware, being present in the moment. And I currently have a course that I've developed specifically for people who need to detox their soul. There are so many people that I see that are struggling, that are in pain, that can't figure out how to move forward when really they need to actually take a step back, as he said, and practice mindfulness. And a part of that practicing mindfulness is getting to know yourself, getting to know what is going on with your own mind and your own emotions, getting to know and understand the things that drive you currently and how you can address the things that are driving you currently. Some of them are could be positive, but they could be in overdrive. So it's still not giving you the desired results that you want. Some of the things that could be driving you could be negative, completely negative, and it's still not giving you the desired results that you want for your life. And so I think this is huge because I see so many people right now, especially as we're in this pandemic, I see so many people talking about the things that they need to let go of, the people they need to let go of, the attitudes and the behaviors that they need to let go of and they need to adjust. But I don't see them doing the work. And the reality is, you can't just talk about what needs to go. You actually should go through a process of letting go and dealing with what is actually going on in your soulish realm so that you can move forward and progress. He says here, what we are actually talking about as a prospective solution or possible aid is not only conventional mindfulness, in which a person learns how to better deal with the contents of his or her mind, but a awareness of the limits of your thinking, of the pressures of thinking on the organism, and the many other built-in challenges that come with having an experimental brain faced with outsized challenges. So let's call this new awareness brain awareness to distinguish it from mindfulness. The main tactic a person can use to deal with the problems flowing from having this experimental brain is brain awareness. If given if a given individual won't do this work or at this split second can't do this work because their mania cannot be mediated by their own efforts in the state that they find themselves, then they may indeed be forced to resort to the conventional solution of psychiatric medicine. They may need lithium or anticonvulsants or calcium channel blockers, antipsychotics, or some other chemical used to supposedly treat mania, and with the power, though only sometimes and always with a physical and emotional cost, to do that work for them. In the end, it is the brain aware individual who ultimately must accomplish the odd and impossible task of saying, if only in a whisper to themselves, I know that I set my own brain racing, but that racing really isn't a good answer. No, creating mania isn't the answer. Perhaps our next brain model will come off with an off switch and we will be able to shut down the machine as we want. But for now, the only smart off switch we have is a smarter inner conversation with ourselves. In natural psychology's view of what is going on, where it is completely understandable and plausible how this wild ride came to be, we ask the individual, we demand of them, if we love them, that they examine their reasons for their racing brain, and not feel so free to race. It is not a race that can be won, a truth the brain aware manic knows somewhere in their being, and a truth that brings with it sadness even at the height of the racing, because they can't outrace existential distress. Indeed, it is that very sadness that they are fleeing as fast as they can, even if they are racing right toward it. It is like the Sufi tale of the disciple who flees his own town because he believes that death is coming for him there, and he races right to the place where death is waiting. That is exactly where the manic also arrives, at depression. Mania is completely understandable as a natural result of setting a brain racing in support of very huge tasks, like making meaning that human beings face. If, for example, a creative person experiences creating as a meaning opportunity, but they're pressured to race in the service of their creative efforts, they may usually be able to mediate that mania, but sometimes that pressure to create may overwhelm. There is no simple off switch that they can throw on, which makes this risk all the more real and dangerous. There is, however, an off switch that people do try to throw. They try to white knuckle calmness. They don't really feel calm, but they do everything in their power to act calm. Maybe using alcohol to help, maybe using mindfulness to help, maybe using constant activity to help. I literally had a friend that we called activity because they were involved in so many different things, and it was that nonstop activity pace that kept them calm, believe it or not. This is why we don't see, frankly, more manic people. Smart people everywhere are doing their best not to be manic, hanging on to the reins of their racing brain as one might hang on to the reins of a wild stallion. This is exhausting work, and sometimes these people are unequal to the work. Just as one might be able to hold on to the reins of a wild stallion for a while, but only for so long. At some point, the powerful animal rips the reins right out of the wrangler's hands. Nevertheless, smart people are, for the most part, built pretty well to hang on to calmness and to avoid full blown mania, at the cost, however, of a tremendous amount of energy to maintain their white knuckled calmness. Even as they hang on, they are enticed by that mania. Consider the following analogy. If you live in a castle and pillagers periodically roar through your kingdom, bandits roam the countryside, and wild animals lurk in the underbrush, you know that you're safer inside the walls than outside. But what if you know or suspect that somewhere out there are psychedelic parties, wild river rides, strange, never before seen sights, and all the excitement and meaning that is lacking in the castle? The pressure is bound to mount, and you begin to rationalize that it is probably safe to go outside, even given how serene the countryside looks, how rarely the bandit sightings you see, and wild animal attacks are reported, how wondrous the sights and sounds are to be found outside. The dangers aren't apparent, and the payoffs feel enormous. Sooner or later, a person is going to get castle fever as they stand on the ramparts and gaze over the landscape. They are bound to stare so hard they will begin to see mirages of meaning outside of the castle. Smart people tend not to realize the extent to which their focused calmness and their many manic activities are more ways of defending themselves against letting their minds go away than affirmative lifestyle choices. They are unnaturally calm or constantly busy, not so much because they love calmness or love keeping busy, but because they do not want to permit the indulgence of mania. They are making an effort to keep their racing mind in their own control at the expense of what may prove to be unhappy lifestyle choices and huge expenditures of energy. As a result, most smart people prevent themselves from launching into full blown mania. They do something else instead. They guard against the wild ride that they live in a forced state of calm that is very much like a straitjacket. Many smart people are living a forced calm life so as to help themselves deal with what would prove a manic way of life if they dared to let themselves go. They intuitively know just how dangerous and powerful their mind is, and for safety reasons, they tread carefully through life. You would think that a person would need to experience full blown mania at least once in order to recognize it as something that they don't ever want to experience again. Nor is it that children watch cautionary videos about mania in school, as soldiers are made to watch cautionary videos about diseases and are taught to avoid them. Nor does anyone around them warn them about it. So, why is this threat perceived as so very dangerous when it is neither taught, talked about in casual conversation, or personally experienced? The likely answer is that intimations of the danger come with the original endowment that makes a smart person who they are. They are built from the start to be one of those persons that recognizes in themselves that crazy manic man on the street who sees as part of his future manic episodes of a Beethoven or a Byron, the one brushing aside waiting piano students because music is dying to come out, the other racing across Britain on a rampage of encounters with married women. Somehow he knows that he has it in him, and that knowledge is a feature of their original personality. If you have been endowed by nature with a brain that can race, it takes and makes some sense to suppose that you have also been born with the abilities of allowing yourself to know that danger of the brain that can race. And it may perhaps also be the case that some numbers of smart people are born without this built in understanding of how dangerous mania can be and are less effective in protecting themselves against the onslaughts. Just as a given person can look down at the edge of a 1,000 foot drop and experience no vertigo when one might guess nature should have built them to back away, so, in a given nature, a smart person may be built without a sufficient sense of the dangers of full blown mania. A smart person, therefore, faces two different but related threats. One, the threat of the painful, white knuckle calmness that feels like self centered boredom and a prison sentence, and the threat of an uncontrolled mania that is painful in the experiencing and is likely to culminate in despair as they realize that their manic efforts did not change the facts of their existence. Forced calmness or uncontrolled mania. Either way, neither is the right answer. We will provide the best possible answer when, in our final chapters, we paint a picture of how the principles and practices of natural psychology can help. So, questions for your pondering. If you are a person whose brain races, questions are: do you or have you experienced mania or manic episodes? How has it expressed itself? Do you feel that you keep yourself artificially calm as a way of dealing with mania? To what extent can you let your brain race but still remain in control of it? To what extent are you at once attracted to the idea of mania or frightened by the idea of mania? So I'll give a moment for those of you who might want to come in and respond to the reading. Um, yeah, it's quite a bit to think about. Um, I know I've had cases of my brain racing. I don't think I've dealt with mania, but I do recognize the times when my brain is racing and I've had to bring myself to a place of calmness. I was actually just sharing this the other night with my husband. I said, when you realize or you've been in places where everything around you is dysfunctional or disjointed or lacking peace, you tend to begin to create spaces of calmness for yourself and for your life. And you start to recognize when you're having people that are disrupting the space environment of peace that you've created. And so it's up to you to decide who you let into that space, how you allow people to alter that space, and whether or not you're going to stay in that space for yourself. So I don't see anyone joining me tonight for conversation. So I'm going to stop here. Hopefully, I've given you something to think about. Check out, look up manic depression, and it might be something to consider, especially if you're a person who has a racing brain, or you feel anxiety, you feel like you can't bring your thoughts under wrap. Um, you might want to consider reading up on that and seeing if that's something that you might need some consultation on. All right. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues. I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. And tomorrow is going to be episode 50. So we'll be taking a break after tomorrow's episode, and then we'll be coming back with the second half of our season. So I hopefully will see you tomorrow on our Thinking Thursday. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to go out and be light. Take care, everyone, and God bless.